go.
Dynasty Pulse right here on Fantasy Sports Advice Network, fantasysportsadvice.com, the Undroppables Network, and Fantasy Football Plus. We are on 3 different networks with this show. I'm Biggs. Greinberg's down there. We got Coach Retzlaff. We got Chev in the house. Schultzy's in the back, rifling around through drawers. Nobody knows what he's doing. But we are excited. We've got a special guest. We're talking about the best, sharpest fantasy football analysts in Dynasty in our price range. And we got a kid who's coming in, and he's going to give us his intel on the rookie class. Greinberg, you got some news? Go ahead and smash that intro.
Yeah, well, let's get our guest up here. What's up, Chase? Welcome to the Dynasty Pulse. We're lucky to have you. Why don't you tell our viewers kind of what your background is, what you're doing in this space, and a little bit about yourself.
All right, so I'm Chase. I go by CKJ on social media sites. I'm a 20-year-old college student who's been in student media for a few years now, from high school and now college. And a couple years back, I wanted to start a YouTube channel just to, have a little side hustle going on, and started it. Didn't really think much of it. I actually used to go by Chase Keller Journalism on YouTube, and to kind of attract more viewership, I changed that to CKJ not too long after. I've been doing draft content for this is my 3rd season doing it on YouTube, but I've been following it for a lot longer. Ever since I started watching football, really, the draft has always intrigued me. I was a basketball player for a dozen years, and NBA draft used to get me. So now I've kind of moved on to a different sport now that I'm not playing basketball anymore. And yeah, it's been growing a following. Oh, I wish I could play football at Whitewater. It would be an honor if I could.
Now, there are quite a few guys who are young up-and-comers in the football analysts space. Guys that we've seen kind of rise up the ranks as they were getting out of college. And one of the things you popped up in my algorithm, and I think it was your Cam Ward video. And I watch a lot. I watch Kurt Benkert, former NFL quarterback, and his QB analysis. I watch TJ O'Sullivan, shout out, go Ags, former NFL quarterback, and his QB analysis with the rookie draft. And one of the things that I noticed when I watched your video was that you are every bit as sharp as those guys. And they literally played in the league. So I was very excited to reach out to you, bring you on here. Not that this is the biggest show, but if we can boost your exposure, and down the line you boost our exposure, I think this is a good relationship, and I want to hear your sharp analysis. So let's get into it. We've got some probing questions. We're gonna probe Chase. So
let's do it.
Watch out. We got Greinberg.
Well, usually it's me doing the probing and Biggs taking it. So we're going to start with you today there, Chase. You're getting it from us, and we're going to have some fun with you on this show. So my first question for you. So I have a really keen affinity for this prospect, and he's been rising up my draft board. He's a fan, we're all a fan of him on this show. And we're talking about Jaxon Dart and his performance at the Senior Bowl and his impressive college stats, but particularly like his dual threat ability. He had 1,500 rushing yards, 12 touchdowns in his college career. How do you see him translating into the fantasy football world? Do you think his mobility and potential for rushing touchdowns could make him a sleeper pick? And even if he doesn't end up in the first round in the NFL draft, how do you see him securing that value in 2025?
So I'm a firm believer that I believe rookie quarterbacks should sit early on, no matter if that's the first few weeks, if that's a whole season. I believe that these guys should be sitting on the bench. And I'm not saying that I don't like Cam Ward's probably going to get thrust into a starting role pretty quick. Depending on where Shadeur goes, he might. And then we're talking about Dart, who's, I believe right now, consensus QB4, according to the mock draft database. but I know he's by the end of this whole thing, he's going to be
Sleep,
QB3, no
everybody.
doubt.
Stay asleep.
Yes. Now Dart pans out really as a pro style quarterback with rushing upside, which I really enjoy out of him. And one thing that you mentioned here with the rushing upside is he definitely has that rushing upside. He had a rushing touchdown in the Senior Bowl game. We've seen his athleticism on tape, or I saw it on tape when I was watching both 2023 and 2024. I don't go any further back unless, it's like a 6th-year prospect or something like that. But I could see him translating in terms of rushing, at least having that immediate impact in dynasty leagues or fantasy football leagues in general. I don't know if that's coming in year 1 because of potentially sitting behind a guy, or it really depends on where he goes. If we're being honest, I mean, I know the Raiders I've seen some Raiders talk with him. I've seen some LA Rams talk with him. And it's really going to depend who he has to sit behind right away. I mean, if he's going off to Vegas, I believe both O'Connell and Minshew are still on contract, if I'm not mistaken. That correct. Probably puts him at QB3 to begin, unless QB2. He can outplay O'Connell in the offseason, or even Minshew too.
Years, so there's a better than average chance that O'Connell is the starting quarterback coming in, depending on what they do in free agency at the draft. I'm not a tape guy. I'm an analytical model guy, and I follow FF Coder right here on the Undroppables. I follow Jax Falcone right here on the Undroppables, and both of them, Coder has Jaxon Dart as he would have been the quarterback 3 in 2024. Jax Falcone put out his anatomy of a top 12 dynasty quarterback, and the only place in the 12 criteria that Dart doesn't hit is draft capital, because we don't know it yet. Total touchdowns in his best season, he was short, and then his touchdown interception ratio. But one of the criteria for a top 12 dynasty quarterback is over 400 rushing yards in his best season. Jaxon Dart had 614. Now, I say I'm not a tape guy. I've been watching because right here on FSAN, we're releasing a rookie guide, and I'm writing up Jaxon Dart. So I went back and I watched 2022 tape, and I watched 2024 tape because I wanted to see the progression. I did the same thing watching Bo Nix and Michael Penix, and knew that from 2022 to 2024, or 2021 to 2023, they had made enough progress to play at the NFL level. I see the same thing from Jaxon Dart. There's progression in his game in terms of his size and strength. In 2022, he looked like a small kid who was using maximal effort to throw the ball. This year, he looks like he's just flipping his wrist out. The ball is getting there with velocity and on time. He's bigger than he was. He moves the pocket. And one of the things that contrasts with Shadeur Sanders and Cam Ward is that Cam Ward has a tendency to leave the pocket too early. Shadeur Sanders has the tendency to leave the pocket too late. And Jaxon Dart, at least in the couple of games that I was watching, one was against Georgia's defense, which is like high level, and then against Duke, he was choosing to leave the pocket at the right time, and that was adding plus value to what he was doing for that Ole Miss team. I really, really like Jaxon Dart. I'm a Raiders fan. We're looking for a quarterback. I would be very unhappy if we draft Shadeur Sanders at the number 6. I don't think Ward is going to be available. But if Jaxon Dart, through this combine process and pro day process, steams himself up to the 106 for Chip Kelly and the Las Vegas Raiders, I would not be upset at all. He's my QB1.
Vegas is a very good fit for him. And as you noted with the mechanics, how he took that huge step up just going throughout college, I noted that as well. He looked a lot more comfortable, just mechanics wise, his final year. And I also noted how I didn't really see too much in terms of the deep game. I've noticed this from last year. I've stopped overvaluing the deep game so much. Michael Penix was my QB3 in the 2024 draft because I absolutely loved his deep ball. And while that could still pan out as it is, I've started to know a lot more in the medium game. And in terms of just touch and accuracy and general ball placement in the medium game, Dart is quite possibly or could be the best quarterback in this class in medium ball placement, even short game too.
Right.
And something that I heard was it's hard to kind of talk about how these Lane Kiffin QBs are going to transfer because I believe it was Bengal who said this a few days ago, how Dart, or not just Dart, Lane Kiffin offenses, for some reason, first or second read is always open. The receivers are typically open for those first and second reads. And that's why I less look at the offense. And while I will question some things like, I mean, Ohio State QBs used to suck at the next level. So you kind of go to scheme for that. And now that trend's kind of been washed away. But I'm excited to see what Dart does at the next level because, yes, he had this Lane Kiffin offense, but the accuracy in the short and medium game, I love him in the hurry up offense. I feel like up-tempo offense is going to be his thing at the next level. Its escapability as well is pretty strong. I'm very excited to see Dart's pro day, and I'm very excited to see how he performs at the combine because he is currently my QB3, but I will not be surprised if he jumps up to QB2 right after those combine and pro day.
I love it. I love that.
And there's in college football, a sack counts against a quarterback's rushing yards. And the criteria is in his best rushing season, over 400 yards, he had 614. That includes with the sacks. So he was taking negative rushing yards on sacks and still was a third over what that criteria was. Now, lest I hog all the narrative, I have a probing question for you. So what have you seen in your tape of Riley Leonard, Will Howard, and Kyle McCord, or Tyler Shuck, that leads you to believe they are undervalued?
So I don't, in terms of general big board area, I'm not sure if I believe that any of them are undervalued per se. But in terms of where I have them ranked on my QB board, where they are ranked, there is one guy that really sticks out, and that is the first guy on my rankings that you mentioned. That is Will Howard. He is my personal QB4 as we speak. I have him higher than Milroe. I have him higher than Dylan Gabriel. But he's consensus QB7 right now. And some things that I notice in Howard is he moves around in the pocket very well. Just general pocket play is very strong out of him. He's especially in the playoffs, he was standing strong, making throws through pressure, getting out of pressure. He also processes at high levels. He's not just a one-read quarterback, which is something that I noticed in a lot of Ohio State quarterbacks dating back. Not particularly with CJ Stroud, I wouldn't say, but if we go further down the line, you see that a lot in Ohio State quarterbacks. Exactly, Justin Fields. And Will Howard doesn't have that. So you also have some good arm talent traits as well out of him. He's got viable arm strength, good impact. He's not anything special in terms of getting balls downfield, but it's viable enough to where that will translate to the league. And something that I most recently noticed is he has some clutch gene to him. He works really well in 2-minute situations dating back to his Kansas State days. And let's disregard what he did against Oregon in the regular season. That was, I have no comment on that personally. Other than that, you see him making plays in the 2-minute drill. We saw it against, Texas in the playoffs? It was a screen pass, but man, you couldn't have made a better read. Or it wasn't a screen pass. It was just a flat check down, I believe. But going through his reads, makes that throw, Travion Henderson to the house. And that was just one example of, for some reason, Ohio State's getting on the board with the field goal or a touchdown, 2-minute drill. Same thing with Kansas State when he was at quarterback as well. But then for negatives, I've seen him have inconsistent accuracy all around and consistent ball placement. At Kansas State was really where he showed this most. He missed some wide open passes while at Kansas State, which is a little concerning. but I didn't see it nearly as much with Ohio State. And again, that might have to do with the fact that maybe Ohio State's scheme is better than Kansas State's. I don't think that's a bold thing to say. But he will also force balls as well at some points into tight windows when it's not necessary. Now, that's not particularly with his first read all the time, but he will. I think I normally call it sometimes trusting yourself too much, and making those throws just could turn into it could be a turnover worthy play in the stat sheet or PFF or whatnot. I don't know off the top of my head his turnover worthy play stats this season, but that's what I believe about Will Howard. I think he is undervalued in terms of where he's ranked quarterback wise. Now, I think the consensus big board has him in the 3rd round, and that's about where I have him as well. But QB4 nonetheless for Will Howard.
Question on Will Howard. You had alluded to earlier, regardless of quarterback you believe, hey, get a few games, holding a clipboard. If Will Howard, and he seems like a quarterback who will go to clipboard you in the NFL, what are some fits that you ideally would like to match his skill set? Because sometimes we get into situations where a player is just buried in a bad situation. What would be a good situation for him?
I have a script that I can pull up very quick. QB landing spots. I published this video on my channel about a week ago on where I predicted where I have every quarterback going. That's already changed, if I'm being honest. Just Jaxon Dart stock is going up. CKJ on YouTube.
Follow it.
Just normal, just letters. I've had people spell it out like CEEKAYJAY. It's just the letters. But Will Howard, I like him going to a team where he can sit back. But I specifically mentioned for him, I would like him to go to a team where he can put a fire under the starter's butt. Okay. I think there are a couple teams where this could happen with. I could see it with Miami. Tua's not performing up to his contract expectations. I could see it with who else was it? I changed my mind on the Chargers just because playoff Justin Herbert has not looked great.
Ooh, okay.
But regular season Justin Herbert, I didn't even think about that. I put him to Indy. I have not been a big Anthony Richardson believer coming out of the draft. I think I've mentioned this before about how I could see like Jalen Milroe in this class kind of being a mini version of Anthony Richardson. Obviously he's not nearly as large as Anthony Richardson is. That's a big dude right there. But Jalen Milroe him and Anthony Richardson kind of match in terms of they're both super athletic has the potential with the arm talent, but the accuracy is not there. The mechanics aren't particularly there either. Now they aren't the same player by any means, but that's why I could see Will Howard going to Indy because he pans out as a QB2, like right out the gate. Could be QB3 if like first week or two, but he's got the talent to be a QB2. But I could also see him developing into a QB1 if he goes to the right situation where, as we've said several times, sit for a few weeks or even a whole season or whatnot. And I think Indy is where he could do that. And not only is he sitting, but he's also putting pressure on Anthony Richardson as well.
I like how you speak to viability and how important it is. I noticed with the Packers, and even though Malik Willis did okay, and the Dolphins, QB viability really came up. It seems like he would be a perfect quarterback for these teams that need some viability for that backup quarterback to be viable and not be dead in the water as well. And to your point, to press up and to push towards the Colts, put some pressure apply to Anthony Richardson. What do you think about the LA Rams, McVay University? I know Stafford isn't necessarily somebody who needs pressure, but do you think that would benefit his player development, Will Howard?
Absolutely. And you're not just talking about him sitting behind Matthew Stafford. You're also talking about him learning in a Sean McVay offense and not getting thrust into a starting role immediately with one of the best coaches in the NFL, one of the best offensive coaches in the NFL. And I don't see him putting pressure on Matthew Stafford. I think that it would be more of a situation if he goes to LA where we're talking about him sitting behind an all-time great quarterback
Jimmy Garoppolo.
instead of putting pressure. Man, I used to love Jimmy Garoppolo.
A lot of people did.
Yes. But it would be more to just sit behind one of the greats and not particularly put pressure on him, but just learn from him.
It'll be very intriguing to watch as the draft unfolds. If Will Howard is available in the 3rd or 4th round, and Chip Kelly does not get John Spytek to pull the trigger and bring him in, knowing what Chip Kelly likes to do with the ball, to, like you said, light a fire under Aiden O'Connell. If the Raiders don't go that direction, that's going to say a lot for Will Howard. I think we're going to have a lot of teams like sitting back waiting. Is Chip Kelly going to pull the trigger? Now Schulte is, I don't see him. He's in my ear. No, talk to Greinberg. Okay. Greinberg's going to ask you Schulte's probing question.
I will ask you Schulte's probing question. Now, Schulte is the king of the probe, and he wants to know about Cam Ward as your QB1 in this draft, which is, it's not unusual. However, with a slightly unusual to people, what sold you on Cam Ward. 4 months ago, you posted a fantastic video that titled "The Game That Sold Me on Cameron Ward." Tell us which game specifically sold you on Ward, what you love about him as a prospect, and what would be your favorite landing spot for him among the teams currently searching for their franchise quarterback.
If you say Miami at Cal, I'm coming through this screen.
I can promise you it is not Miami at Cal. I actually note that what he had that really, really, really bad pick 6 against Cal, I believe. That was terrible. It was actually a lot earlier than that. So I'll end up mentioning this later on, but fun fact, the game that sold me on Cam Ward is a game that he lost by 14 points. That we're talking 2023 Wazoo against Oregon, where Cam Ward, I have the stats here, completed 71% of passes but had an adjusted completion percentage of 86%, completed 34 passes for 438 yards and only 1 passing touchdown but no picks. And he also, if you exclude the sacks, which I know he mentioned that with Jaxon Dart, you exclude the sacks, he also had 51 rushing yards in this game as well. 1 touchdown, sure. Nearly 500 yards. And we're talking, I don't know exactly how many 4th down conversions this team failed, but it was a lot. They went for it on 4th down. Yeah, they went for it way too much on 4th down, passed up on points way too much, and it ended up biting him. And that game sold me on Cam Ward. But when it comes to like my general thoughts on Cam Ward in his 5 years of college football, the first thing that I think comes to a lot of people's minds is his escapability and off-script capabilities with how electric he is. It's not particularly we've seen guys who can play really well out of the pocket. We haven't seen many guys who can play as electric out of the pocket as Cam Ward. Now, it's hard to evaluate off-script capabilities for the next level simply because it's going to be a lot harder to make those plays out of the pocket. But you get out of the pocket, he does a great job at making those plays. And he moves around well in the pocket as well. And he's also an accurate quarterback on the run, which is something I noted. And that is something that I really like out of quarterbacks, is not you guys who can make off-platform throws, off-balance throws, not with ease, but just if you can hit on, let's say, 55, 60% of those off-balance throws, especially when they're super awkward, I'm going to like you as a quarterback prospect. But it's not just that. It's also the arm talent as well. He's very mechanically sound. We see him making a lot of throws from really weird and awkward arm angles, which kind of has to do with the off-platform-ish. And he is generally accurate as well. And something that Marcus Whitman says best. Now, I think he said it's a general scouting term, but I actually hadn't heard it until I watched his video on Cam Ward. It's accuracy that hits the door but doesn't hit the keyhole. He's going to get the ball there, but it's not going to be perfect. But I do think it's nearly perfect when we're talking about the deep game. There's one game, again, I'm going back to Wazoo, and I'll say why I keep bringing up Wazoo here in a second. He gets balls in the deep game so easily, and there was one throw that solidified that for me. It was against Oregon State. He threw it to his running back. I'm blanking on his name, but he threw a wheel route to his running back who was smothered. Perfect throw. If it was 1 inch off anyway, it's an incomplete pass. And the running back, I mean, shout out to the running back too. He made the one-handed grab. We're talking, that's a throw 30 yards downfield outside the numbers. Perfect placement in smothered coverage. And one more thing before I get into this whole personal Wazoo thing. I don't think many people talk about his injury history. He has had no newsworthy injuries throughout his career, and he's played over 4,000 collegiate snaps, which is something that I think is phenomenal. And now the personal connection, this is just going to be super weird, but Cam Ward used to post on TikTok all the time, and then he deactivated it at some point. I think it was 2022. I was following him on TikTok before he started his freshman season and at Carnet Word, and I really liked his videos, so I started watching him on the field, and now he's been one of my favorite collegiate quarterbacks for 5 years. When he transferred out to Miami, I was super excited, super pumped for him. When he transferred to Wazoo, I was super pumped for him, especially that jump being FCS to FBS, and at that point, Power 5 as well. I have that connection with Cam Ward, which might make me sound a little biased in my evaluation, but you know what? I don't care. He's a stud.
And that's why
Shadarius incarnate word.
But also that's why TikTok is such an important piece of the American culture right now.
Yes. And I mean, they were just goofy old videos, or they weren't goofy, but they weren't him on the field. Like, he was making relatable content, and that's what I really enjoyed watching out of him. But outside of that, I don't think Cam Ward falls outside of the top 3, even if Shadeur goes first overall, in which if Shadeur goes first overall, I might start a riot. But we got the top 3 teams here with the Titans, who clearly don't really trust Will Levis that much. He got benched multiple times this past season, and he was a second-round pick, is what not a lot of people understand that. Sure, a lot of people, he might go 4th overall to the Colts. I'm pretty sure he had first overall pick buzz at some point.
Yes.
And he falls to the second round. There's a reason he fell to the second round. There's a reason teams did not want to take a chance on him in the first.
Well, because
you won't have to riot if he goes first to the Titans, because Chev's got you covered. Chev and our boy Dynasty FK and we did a mock draft that was an all-position mock draft. The first 2 rounds, and Shadeur fell to the first pick of the second round. There was not a situation that any of us wanted to pull that trigger on him, and we were the ones making the picks. So when it happened, I kind of looked at the draft board and I went, I can see this happening.
I could totally see it too. I mean, again, I think the key here is Jaxon Dart in the combine and in the pro day, because if Jaxon Dart can take the consensus QB2 spot and can set himself apart from Shadeur in a positive way, Shadeur could definitely fall out of the first round, especially given that there aren't a lot of top heavy or a lot of top quarterbacks. Like, we're not going to see every QB needy team taking a quarterback in the first round, just because you're not going to see the Titans, the Browns, the Giants, the Raiders, possibly the Jets. You're not going to see Dylan Gabriel in the first round. So The Titans, I do like the Titans here, but if they don't take Ward, it better be Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter, or I would also maybe accept Will Johnson, but it better be one of those two quote-unquote generational talents. That apparently the Titan, I can't remember their GM's name, but he said they're taking a generational talent at first overall.
Yeah.
Might not be a quarterback.
Chev is our resident Titans fan.
Yes.
And with that, Chef, you got a probing question. Chev, you got a probing question.
Okay. So there's a lot to catch up on here. One, love your analysis of Will Howard. I firmly believe that he's going to be a day 2 pick. Everything that you highlighted, like the only question that I would have with that, and we can talk about that later, is do you think that the Ohio State offensive line had a lot to do with how he stood and represented himself in the pocket? So that's my first question.
Mm-hmm. So, but also to note is later down the line, Ohio State's O-line actually did have their fair share of injuries. I mean, it's epitomized when you note that Donovan Jackson had to kick out from offensive guard to left tackle mid-season, changed positions, and he excelled at both. Sure. And yeah, Ohio State's O-line is normally fantastic. But even just seeing some plays on tape where you have guys right in his face, he's making these throws with guys right in his face. The pressure's coming, and he's getting rid of the ball at it. I mean, I mentioned the inconsistent accuracy, but when it's on point, it's on point.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's great catch and run. Like he's hitting guys in stride, and they're seamlessly turning upfield and creating yak. So like I said, I love that. I think I personally right now have Will Howard ahead of Jaxon Dart, but that's a different story for a different. I think that he's going to blow up because of his athleticism, and he's going to be the hottest quarterback because of the fact that he won the national championship and represented himself well. And I think he's going to test really well. I mean, this is a guy who had, an 80-yard touchdown run against Texas in 2023. So he's going to be mobile and all that stuff. But that's not what my question is about. My question is regarding Shadeur Sanders. So I watched your eval of Shadeur Sanders. I actually, for the FSAN draft guide that we're working on, I had Shadeur Sanders to break down too. We highlighted quite a few of the same strengths and weaknesses. And I wanted to ask you, not necessarily where you have him going, but what landing spot do you think would be the best for him at accentuating his strengths and minimizing his weaknesses? And conversely, what do you think the worst landing spot for him would be?
So it's kind of hard. I don't personally have a deep understanding on like NFL offensive schemes. I do research on that for sure, but like you might ask me, what offense do the Jets run? And I could blank at it for 2 minutes and then figure it out. But when it comes to Shadeur Sanders, I think the big thing for him for making a contribution early on is he has to go to a team with respectable offensive tackles and not to an offensive line like Caleb Williams had. I mean, the tackles were the best part, but we're like flip that around here. Caleb's interior O-line was atrocious. And I think just watching Shadeur and finding his strengths and weaknesses, he's got to go to a team where those tackles are going to actually be able to block for him and not give up pressures once every other play. One of my biggest issues with Sanders was he takes too many sacks. And I know we mentioned this earlier. He stands in the pocket for too long and waits to pull that trigger to get out of the pocket for way too long. And when the pressure comes inside first, I noticed that he's actually not too bad at getting out of the pocket. It's when the blind side comes in or even off the edge on the other side, he struggles to get out of the pocket when those guys are the ones getting the pressure. He either escapes too late or he tries to play hero ball and gets nowhere. So when it comes to specific teams, we'll just start at the top and kind of move our way down. The Titans, I think, as of now, wouldn't be the best situation at all, but it's not the worst thing ever because J.C. Latham, I was high on J.C. Latham. His rookie season was whatever, not great, not bad.
Well, he's adapting from playing right tackle all throughout his career at Alabama to having to switch back to left. Where I mean, he was a 5-star or a 4-star at left, but then he moved to right at Alabama, so he's played right for 2 years. So I mean, we got to kind of temper expectations a little bit. But yeah, we're in the same page. Like I love JC Latham.
I was very high on him coming out too, and I saw a lot of scouts saying he could potentially kick inside. Then he goes to the Titans, and that solidifies he's not kicking inside. They did the same thing with Peter Skoronski the year before. They're not picking another first-round tackle just to kick him inside again. And the issue is potentially on the other side where Jalen Duncan is still developing as well. And another guy I was high on as well coming out. I did like Jalen Duncan coming out. And I think for now, you have 2 developing tackles. If you develop with them, that's cool. But your rookie year might not be the best. But again, JC Latham, if he takes that step up in year 2, Jalen Duncan continues to develop, that could be a good spot. But it's still kind of unknown. Browns, no. Don't see that working. From an offensive line perspective, Giants, if they take an offensive tackle high in the draft after they take Shadeur, if he of course goes this high, because obviously Andrew Thomas, he's been hurt, but when he's on the field, he is a high impact offensive tackle, and there's no doubting that. And then just kind of some other good teams at the top. I do think the Raiders tackles are fine. The Jets as well. The Saints would be probably worst case scenario, and that's where I'll mention that is not just the Saints not only having 2 bad tackles, but their offense as we speak is currently we don't know what they're going to be doing. Now, obviously the rumor is they're going to be hiring Kellen Moore after the Super Bowl, but so many coaches have turned down the Saints job so far that I would not be surprised if Kellen Moore did the same and the Saints got screwed. I think that would be the worst spot for Shadeur. But I will say if they do land Kellen Moore has adjusted to different quarterback skill sets throughout his career. I mean, Jalen Hurts and Justin Herbert are not the same person. Jalen Hurts, Justin Herbert, and Dak Prescott are not the same types of quarterbacks. Right. Dak was also in his 3rd season when Kellen Moore came around. Justin Herbert was already a pretty good quarterback when Kellen Moore came around, and Jalen Hurts as same thing with him. So we also haven't seen Kellen Moore truly develop a quarterback just yet. And that's where I get into kind of the bigger strengths. I do think that Shadeur would kind of thrive in a West Coast offense at the next level. As long, again, and I mentioned this before, as long as he's able to develop before he starts gunslinging the ball. Now, the Titans do incorporate some West Coast style. I noticed that. Browns aren't really West Coast, but we do see them running up-tempo offense, which I do think would be fine for Shadeur because a lot of that's a lot of what he did at Colorado was some up-tempo stuff. And the LA Rams, they might need a quarterback soon as well. And that's a pretty decent, I'm not going to say they're full on West Coast, but Sean McVay, he does whatever he wants. So I would say best fit wise would be Tennessee, but I don't think they should draft him because Cam Ward is there. And that's obviously becomes the lingering question is this would only work if the Titans for some odd reason pass on Cam Ward, which would be dumb, straight up, would not be a great idea. And if we disregard the Titans, then we're talking about the LA Rams more. I think the LA Rams would probably be that best fit for Shadeur if the Titans take Cam Ward.
Shout out the Al Davis coaching tree and the West Coast offense.
Yes.
You just stressed me out so much just then.
I love that. I could see the gray hairs growing in his beard right now. Unlike you, Chase, like you're not even close to the grayness that we have.
I'm 20.
Yeah, Chev was not in the cement aisle. That's for sure.
Yeah, no. But here's the deal. Here's the scary part: is Brian Callahan on more than one occasion has said like really, really positive things about Shadeur Sanders, and it stresses me out. Like,
No,
hey.
that's something that I'd like to do a lot. So with my stuff on YouTube, I like writing scripts. Journalism is my thing. I like writing scripts, and kind of later on throughout my YouTube, I guess you quote unquote career, even though it's only been 2.5 years at this point.
I love your content, by the way. I don't know if I said that when we got on the deal.
I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Mike likes writing scripts too.
Yes. I love script writing, and that's kind of what I noticed in a lot of specifically like NFL draft guys, or even just, I love myself some Marcus Whitman, but he does make a very long form content, and that's his thing. So is it for a lot of others as well. I kind of want to change that. So when I do that in my scripts, I do write sometimes. I have those like, and just kind of like people's stomach drop, or just make people nervous or whatnot. That's what I like to do.
Drop me there, bud. Yeah, I would like to say that I get bricked up in the cement aisle for the idea of drafting Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, but I do not get bricked up in the cement aisle when I talk about drafting Shadeur Sanders.
Take your pill, Chev. Take your pill.
Yeah. It's not gonna be more than 4 hours if we draft.
Yeah, he won't be calling the doctor, that's for sure.
Yeah, no.
So Chase, pivoting over, as fantasy gamers, we often glue and cling onto the positives of what players can offer, and it's very easy for us to fat brain and ignore the negatives, right?
Who does
Justin
that?
Fields comes to mind. So many gamers ignored his flaws, but if he could rush and score fantasy points, it didn't matter. You spoke to quarterbacks should start off with a little bit of time on the bench. Now, gamers will say, hey, I draft him late, push him in, I want my fantasy points. Take a player like Quinn Ewers. He comes to mind as a guy who lacks pocket awareness, steps up into the pocket when it's collapsing, just a flaw there. Among the Cam Wards, Shadeur Sanders, Jaxon Dart, who appear at the top of the rankings, what are some glaring holes or skills that need improvement that are more subtle that the average fantasy gamer may not pick up on? And in year one, we may not see the exact fantasy expenditure as far as points and output that we would like. Like, what are some subtle things that we have to look out for early in development?
So we'll start with Cam Ward. A lot of people are dodging him. Some people are taking Shadeur over Cam Ward for the reason that he will make some boneheaded decisions on the field. We just talked about that Cal Miami game. That pick six was quite possibly the worst decision he could have made in that moment, and he's done this at some points. I put down some stats here. So in 2024, Cam Ward had a turnover-worthy play percentage of 3.3%, which is actually in the top half of FBS quarterbacks. That's actually not too bad in terms of FBS guys. That was actually the best of his career was 2024. He's had he's had worse seasons with Wazoo and Incarnate Word, but still throwing a high amount of picks could be an issue for, we'll say, NFL stat watchers. But then we talk about terms of how does that impact at the fantasy football level. And I want to throw back to 2019 here. I'm sure we all remember a statistically significant season in 2019 from a quarterback that year where something weird happened. Does anyone know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Are you talking about Jameis Winston at 30 for 30?
30-30 club. Jameis Winston finished at his QB 5 in his 30-30 season, which is something that I wasn't surprised about, but I at that point, I wasn't drafting Jameis Winston in fantasy football that year. I don't know. I didn't know off the top of my head, but making some of those bad decisions might not particularly translate to bad fantasy production if he can also throw for the scores and get downfield as well. So that's why I mentioned Jameis Winston, because you're not going to say his 30-30 season was good. And from a fantasy football perspective, he was QB5. So other than that, I noticed something else I noticed about Cam Ward, which might do with the might turn into turnover-worthy plays, is he could be prone to blitzes in the NFL. And how I describe it is, for some reason, what I see is he will stand in the pocket and take on his processing the same way if it was a 3-man rush or if it was a 7-man blitz. For some reason, he doesn't particularly adjust to that. And yes, that escapability, he gets out of the pocket early, as we mentioned, but he's not taking the sacks particularly. I think I mistakenly said something in my Cam Ward scouting report where I said he took way more sacks than he actually did because I had the wrong season. But I also say this, is that the nonchalant thing taken over? Is he standing in the pocket for 7-man blitzes and 3-man rushes the same way? Because people are like, he looks way too cool doing stuff.
Poised, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you brought up Quinn Ewers, coach, because there is a statistic out there that shows 25% NFL hit rate as far as a starting quarterback in the NFL earning a QB1 job for 5-star recruits. Now, I don't know what happened on the way to Texas. It can only be attributed to certified piece of shit Steve Sarkisian. But somewhere along the line in Quinn Ewers' career, he kind of came off the rails because he is the only quarterback in this class that was a 5-star recruit. That number of NFL hit rates drops to 12% for 4-star and under. So we're looking at 12% hit rates on most of these guys coming out of high school. Now, of course, we have situations like Trey Harris played himself above his recruiting level. Jaxon Dart, Shadeur Sanders, Cam Ward, they've all played themselves into positions that were above their high school recruiting level. And Quinn Ewers did not even meet the expectations. We have a year to see what Steve Sarkisian does to Arch Manning, who was the consensus best quarterback of all time in 2026. But I just wanted you mentioned Quinn Ewers' name. I wanted to throw that out there because early on in the recruiting or in the scouting process in 2024, I kept an eye on Quinn Ewers, and he absolutely disappointed.
I will, before I move on to Shadeur, I will say that with Ewers, I think he should have stayed another year of college simply because he has not played a fully healthy season as a college player. And some of these issues that we see with him could potentially be the injuries still being there. He's playing through them. That's why, because he entered the draft, I would love to see him go. I would not want to see him go to a team that he would even come close to playing year one, but potentially playing later down the line so he could sit back and have a healthy offseason and not have to deal with an injury for the first time since his Ohio State days. But I'm not a huge fan of Quinn Ewers in the first place. Yeah. Now, with Shadeur Sanders, he is my QB2 as we speak. I do think there are good traits with him. But what's something that fantasy gamers may not see is the sacks. And that's something that I've already mentioned earlier, holding on to the ball for way too long and then trying to leave, and then he can't accelerate fast enough to get out of the sack.
We call that Sam Howell syndrome.
Yes. Sam Howell, man, I have mixed feelings on Sam Howell, if I'm being honest.
I'm a certified Sam Howell lover.
I love him at some points. I hate him at some points, but
you love him when when you're not watching him play football, and you hate him when you have to watch him play football. I get it.
No, I'm loving him when he's a top 10 quarterback through 14 weeks of the season.
Too bad that there's 4 more weeks after that.
I thought he was a steal, and I was a little wrong, but I still have that soft spot. Maybe someday he'll be better.
No, he was until he wasn't. It's fantastic. No shade. Not a Sam Howell truther here myself, but yeah.
Hey Chase, you had also mentioned Quinn Ewers. You wanted him to go back for another year. Should Jalen Milroe have gone back?
I don't know if he particularly would have developed in the ways that he needs to develop, given that he did have DeBoer and in his final collegiate season, and he could have returned for another year. But I don't know. I think he's got talent that he just needs to be better with. But that would be kind of asking him to go out of the scheme a little bit, because most of his completions in the short medium game were simple anticipation throws where the guy was either wide open or open enough to where it could be, if he doesn't throw it fast enough or doesn't put too much zip on the ball, it's going to be jarred loose. But he's got that zip. He's got the arm strength. He's got the deep. I've noticed he's actually not too bad in the deep game, and he's obviously really damn athletic. But I don't know if him playing at Alabama would have been better for his stock, because he did not improve on that with the new coach. Yeah. And if he was to stay another year, I would have liked to see him in a different scheme to potentially help him improve his stock a little bit more. Yeah. But yeah, it's just the touch on the short and medium balls. That's the massive issue.
Do you think he's more of, speaking of Cam Ward, where he's the door, not the keyhole, do you think Jalen Milroe is just side of the barn and not the door for accuracy? Would that be accurate?
He might be missing the barn altogether.
Okay, man, I'm trying to see the bullish nature, and that's why I asked. Should he have gone back? Okay.
Yep. Yeah, I think
there's a couple things with Milroe. One, he was being forced out because they have a 5-star quarterback in Keelan Russell coming to T-Town. So he was never going back to Alabama. I would have liked to have seen him go to somewhere like Lincoln Riley at USC. And I mean, that's basically been kind of a quarterback rehabilitation factory. Like you saw it early on with Miller Moss, and then you saw it with Jalen Hurts at OU. Like he gets the best out of those guys and gets them ready. So that's what I wanted to see. I didn't want to see him in the draft this year at all. Him or Quinn Ewers.
I think Lincoln Riley's overhated as a head coach. I mean, some success, we saw USC this season under expectations, but they did beat Texas A&M in the bowl game, and that was a pretty damn good win. I've lost my train of thought.
Well, we do have some breaking news before we get to the next section, which is our Dynasty stashes. The NFL Honors Awards are going on currently as we speak right now, today. Last night when we recorded this last Thursday, today being Saturday, Mike. Ben Johnson won Assistant Coach of the Year. Yep. Joe Burrow, Comeback Player of the Year. Defensive Rookie of the Year, Jared Verse over Cooper DeJean, Braden Fisk, and Quinyon Mitchell. Offensive Rookie of the Year, Jaden Daniels over Brock Bowers and Malik Neighbors, Bo Nix, Brian Thomas Jr. Patrick Surtain, Defensive Player of the Year over TJ Watt. Anyway. Saquon Barkley, Offensive Player of the Year, and they are still waiting to announce the MVP, Josh Allen or Saquon. But you will hear that probably a couple days before you watch this video.
Jaden Daniels, Offensive Rookie of the Year.
Cement aisle, baby, bricked up. Jaden Daniels.
Love it. What a great season. I love it. Let's
not give short shrift to Brock Bowers, baby.
This hoodie's number too 13. Big. There we go.
Oh my goodness.
This guy.
Number 13 pick in the draft, runner-up for Offensive Rookie of the Year.
It's pretty impressive. Yeah, no, Brock Bowers was a force, but Jaden Daniels.
It's a quarterback award. Just relax, Biggs.
There we go. All right, let's move on, folks. We are moving on to our Dynasty stashes, and our guest of honor here, Chase, with your Broncos uniform. Are you got a Broncos on deck? No, probably not.
I do not have a Bronco on deck. I don't think they've particularly. I mean,
Marvin
if
Mims?
it was a rookie, maybe, but we don't know who the Broncos are drafting just yet.
I love your stash, though.
Yes, I end up going with Malik Washington, Miami Dolphins wide receiver. He was my wide receiver 10 in the 2024 NFL draft, ahead of big names like Xavier Legette, Jalen Polk, Jermaine Burton, list kind of goes on. He was the 26th wide receiver taken in the draft. Probably one of, I don't remember my steals list, but he was definitely up there. He kind of took over for the starting slot position in Miami for the last 4 games, where his best game, he put up 5 for 52, also had 4 for 48, 4 catches, 41. And now Tyreek Hill's going out the door. You're asking Malik Washington to take a step up. You're asking him to take on a more important role in that offense. And if McDaniel can use him in creative ways, he will be hard to stop this season. Had 25 rushing touchdowns. No, he did not. 25 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. His yards per route run this season, something I found interesting, was 0.86, while in his last season at Virginia, it was 3.15. He actually kind of played 50-50. He played, I think it was 53% in the slot and 47% outside in his first NFL season, and that's nothing like he ever did in college. So if McDaniel can find the proper role for this guy, he could become a pretty good 500, 600-yard guy this season as he continues to develop. And dynasty-wise, this is kind of like a high floor, high ceiling pick. You're taking a guy who's a starting wide receiver in the NFL as a second-year player, and if they could figure this guy out, he's going to be one of the bigger slot threats in the NFL. Now, I'm not saying that's coming up this season, but maybe make a year 3, year 4, he could be a huge impact player in Miami. And I want to also give a quick honorable mention. I almost did Jaxon Sanders simply because he's the only tight end on contract with Carolina right now. And that's pretty much it. I like myself some Jaxon Sanders, but he's a tight end. So
ball.
Hey, we love some Will Howard propaganda when we see it. You spoke earlier to the viability of a backup quarterback. I think what you're setting up long form, Malik Washington possibly catching some passes from Will Howard. So I see you, man. I like that call.
Him or Kyle McCord. I like Kyle McCord going to Miami as well.
I like Kyle McCord a lot. I wanted you to talk about him when I asked my question earlier about sell me.
I'm not too high on Kyle McCord, but I do think if he can go to the right team, he could be pretty good. And I think Miami is that right team.
Nice. Schultze is not here, so let's go, Coach. Who's your dynasty stash?
So for me, it's just going to be a utility, a purpose for dynasty stash. As part of my strategy behind the pick is how quickly can this player matriculate up while still being a deep cut, and where can I gain liquidity to flip and turn? This is not going to necessarily be a year-over-year thing where I'm looking for long-term viability. I look at the running back position year over year. It has the clearest path to playing time just from attrition, and I'm talking about running back Michael Carter for the Arizona Cardinals. In Week 18, Carter was RB11, 15.9 fantasy points. In Carter's rookie season, this is a deep cut. It's a long time ago, 2021, 3 games as an RB14 or higher, with one of those games being the RB1 overall. In 2021, Carter was 8th in yards per reception, 14th in yards per route run. When Michael Carter gets chances to play, he will produce. At this point, he is not going to be a year-over-year starter in the NFL. That's not what I'm looking for in this stash. What I'm looking for is a pocket of games where Carter buoys up the depth chart. It could be a James Conner injury and the combination of Trey Benson not having the job outright. Of course, committees are the thing, so it could be a 55-45 split anyways. My ideal end ceiling outcome would be for Michael Carter to get a handful of games for the Cardinals near the playoff stretch run. This is long form, and be able to sell to a contender who needs a few weeks of RB production. Could that be somehow a scant third-round rookie pick when people aren't really seeing clearly on flipping picks for players? My Socratic method question is simply, what is the greater probability? Michael Carter isn't good enough to be a part of an NFL backfield, or the Jets are an inept franchise? I rest my case.
There you go. I do just want to say, be on the lookout because Michael Carter is going to earn a base salary of 1.1875 million, and he's got 1.220 million, and he's got a cap hit of 1.270. So it only costs the Cardinals $50,000 if they want to cut him. That's never good, especially with a couple of running backs they have in house already.
I think Michael Carter's due for something good, but at the same time, I also like Trey Benson a lot. So I think that backfield's pretty good. There are a lot of names that I like, including James Conner as well, but I don't know if I could see Michael Carter carving out a great role unless obviously James Conner goes down, which we've seen several times in his time at Arizona.
See, folks, that's why you need to click over to CKJ's Chase Journalism.
Where's my name? Where's my camera?
Right
there it is.
Now, because of crack analysis, he's due. You just made all of us here proud.
We love it.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. That's our line because he's due.
That's like PAT every Thursday. He's due.
He's due. All right.
Dude,
All right, so let's talk about it.
Y'all know ball. You know ball.
I'm going to talk about another guy who's due. And I tried to slow play it in the show sheet. I said, I'm going to reveal
how to quit you.
And that is Treylon Burks. Not in the show sheet and gave it away. I will never give up on Treylon Burks. I know I'm wearing an LSU hat right now, but as a Cal fan, I can root for multiple teams in NCAA, and I'd root for LSU and Arkansas. That rivalry's over, and I love Treylon Burks. He has had one of the worst situations that he was pushed into over the first 3 years of his career. Bad injury luck, but his profile as somebody who absolutely torched Alabama defensive backs, had pretty good receiving numbers as he was rising to the NFL level. Got hurt in training camp, a lot of negative press about him, got concussed later on in the season, hurt himself last year, slid down the depth chart. They brought in multiple options that just kind of buried him, and then he got hurt again. But at some point, Treylon Burks is going to be a fungible asset on your Dynasty roster. And guess what he's going to cost you? Absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Stashing him wherever I can and hoping, because
I wish I knew how to quit you.
Man, fungible, right up there with cromulent. Just another chef's kiss, Big's word. Almost as good as penultimate. Love it.
Almost as good as penultimate.
Jamie, penultimate means second to last.
Yes. Can confirm that is what that means. My dynasty stash. Is it my turn? Is it my turn? It's my turn. I'm gonna go with initially I had the booty warrior in here, Kayshon Boutte. He's a guy that I had discussed on another show. Former LSU Tiger, as Biggs is pointing to the hat, but I switched it up last second because somebody else had a Patriot. Oh yeah, Schultz's stash was Javon Baker, so I didn't want to go two Patriots because that's just insanity, and two, I wanted to get a little bit more into the Dynasty verse and expand the Dynasty Pulse. So my Dynasty stash is Dyami Brown. Amon-Ra St. Brown's arch nemesis, due to no doing of his own. And I like what he put on film this year. Now, this is assuming that they're going to draft Luther Burden or Emeka Egbuka or Matthew Golden. But if they don't,
Shadarius.
All right, or Ladarius Shadarius. Obviously,
Noah Theodore Olivier.
Noah Theodore Olivier must be discussed at all points when we're talking about potential first round draft capital. I mean, he's undefeated. University of Regina tight end. we got to talk about Noah Theodore Olivier, but this is not the time for that. This is the time for Dyami Brown. He's finally putting it together with a quarterback who, I mean, for all intents and purposes, I mean, we just found out last night. We just found out last night, yesterday, tomorrow, next week, that Jaden Daniels is officially the Rookie of the Year. And I don't feel like we've hit any sort of ceiling outcome with his passing. And
120 over 80. You got the pulse, baby. 120 over 80. Keep going. Keep cooking.
Talk about it. Yes. All right. So I think that there's room for one more tremendous pass catching option. And first, my money would be on Ben Sinnott, but that's not a stash because everybody's got Ben Sinnott and everybody's bricked up in the cement aisle about Ben Sinnott. But a guy that you're probably not thinking about is Dyami Brown. And you saw what he did in the playoffs this year. So stash Dyami Brown or go send a trade offer like a 2026 fourth or something to get Dyami Brown. It may work. It may not. You might find somebody, like if you offer the trade, they might be like, guys are getting sharp now. You can't just go throwing a trade out there because then people think you're all horned up for the guy and then they'll just say no just because. So you got to walk it back, throw him in a trade just as a throw in for a bigger deal, and then you can get potentially a piece of what's going to be an elite offense in 2020.
You got to put the book up in front when you're walking down the hallway, man.
Yeah. If the
Don't
teacher calls you to the chalkboard, you just carry your backpack with you because you say your mom's checking you out afterwards. And then you go up there and you write Dyami Brown no matter what for a 2026 fourth. That's my dynasty stash.
I think it's interesting that you have him over Zachamide Schletzius.
Zachamide Schletzius is honestly probably one of the biggest buys in all of Devi and Campus to Canton. I didn't want to get into this here because this is an NFL show, but if you're going to talk about the Schletzius, you have to just be ready to do whatever it takes. You got to be ready to Shadarius on command if you're going to talk about the Schletzius.
Try saying that name 5 times fast,
off, man. Taped off.
Oh my God. Chase is pretty confused right now, and that's okay. Because I am too. Because
I got some D3 guys I can pull out. That's about it.
I've been to Regina a lot.
Yeah, we're making up prospects at this point. We're headed on. I'm going to talk.
Yeah,
about,
see, we like to write scripts too, except they're completely fake players. CJ.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right. I'm going to talk about Jordan Whittington, who is not a scripted player, but maybe I'm going to talk it in a scripted manner here. You know what? Great season last year, but now he's got an opportunity there's a lot of influx right now. There's a lot of rumors heading in about Cooper Kupp leaving, and I just think that's going to open up Whittington's opportunity. His progression as a route runner has been great, and with Cooper Kupp on his way out, I just think that this is going to be a good situation. You know, the departure of Kupp, the staple Rams offense, you know, he's had a number 2 wide receiver look really good. Sean McVay, year after year after year. Robert Woods was very profitable in dynasty and in fantasy football formats for a lot of years, and Whittington is going to be that guy moving forward, I think. So I think he's a low risk, high reward play. Good versatile skill set, proven special teamer that adds more value. He's got an increased role in the offense, and I think he could evolve into a more reliable option. You know, they may bring in some talent at wide receiver, but this class isn't very strong right now in that aspect. So I just think that there could be some very good opportunity for Jordan Whittington to emerge and become a very valuable player. And, you know, he could creep into that top 36 range next year as a wide receiver 3 with wide receiver 2 upside.
That's correct.
Love that.
Love
This
it.
is
Bars, baby, bars.
We're never wrong, just sometimes late or early.
Exactly. Chase, man, you were on the case today. Sorry, that's my Paw Patrol reference, but man, you kicked some butt, and we all got a lot smarter today because of you joining our show. We learned a lot about the prospects, some deep analysis in the quarterback room. Like, honestly, there's a lot of, uncertainty headed into this draft with that class. People say it's a pretty weak class, and, you've helped us kind of pave the way a bit here. You add some more clarity, and your top-notch analysis was really, really good today. We really appreciate you coming on.
Yes. I appreciate you guys for having me. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Well,
Yeah,
listen,
and everybody else,
you,
make sure you go to CKJ and subscribe.
Find my camera again.
FantasySportsAdviceNetwork.com. You can go there. I'll send you a link, CK. Also, the Undroppables, the Uncovered channel, which is a new channel. If any of you out there want to do content creation for your own team that we don't already cover, we are looking for people. And then right here on the Fantasy Football Plus, this is the debut of our 3-network simulcast. And we just we're here for you guys. We want you to win. And so we're grinding. We're grinding to do that.
Yeah. We appreciate everybody from tuning in. And Chase, one last time, tell everybody where to find your awesome content.
You can find me CKJ on YouTube, Chase Keller Journalism on Instagram and TikTok, although I don't use those sites too much right now, but I do use a lot of Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. C Keller Sports on that as well.
C Keller Sports.
C Keller Sports. I couldn't get Chase Keller Journalism. It was too long.
Well,
that's what Chef said.
Whoa.
Boom. Okay, man. Appreciate everybody from tuning in.
That's a way to end it.
Yeah, there we go. Let's peace out, everyone. On that note, latest skaters.
We hope you